Long ago, Confucius said, life is really simple, but men insist on making it complicated. Yes, life used to be very, very simple. All we had to do a long time ago is just go through one doorway and we'd end up in paradise. There are actually two doorways on our way to paradise, but the second doorway is an automatic. All we have to do is go through the first doorway, because the second doorway is where we reap what we sow. What we sow is in the second stage of knowledge, and what we reap is in the third stage of knowledge. Remember, there are three stages of knowledge. We've got acquired, applied, manifested. Thoughts, actions, reactions. Beliefs, causes, effects. Belief system, lifestyle choices, feedback system. The things we think in the first stage of knowledge, the things we do or have done to us in the second stage of knowledge, and then the things we get in the third stage of knowledge. So, all we have to do is go through that first doorway. We got to apply what we know. And then the second doorway, going from actions to reactions, that's an automatic. We reap what we sow. That's the law of cause and effect. Now, when we go back and look at what we had a long time ago, when life was simple, when there were only three main boxes most of the time, if we exclude accidents and acts of nature, life was so simple long ago, we only had three boxes, 4 portals, and 55 pieces. Now that might sound a little complicated, but when we look at the first stage of knowledge, we had 2 groups up there. We had 2 main groups. We had 12 essential needs based on this law of cause and effect, and then we also had 5 things that we mastered. Remember, our brains nearly doubled in size about 2 million years ago, and that let us master things we never mastered before. Now, a lot of people are going to try to trick you and try to tell you that the first thing we mastered and its worst application is what made our brains grow. And that's not true. It's out of sequence. We could not have mastered fire, the first thing we mastered, had we not had a brain to do so. Our brains grew first. We got to stop falling for lies that try to excuse the fall of mankind. So this is how life was simple in the beginning. We had these 12 essential needs and 5 things we mastered. And that's 17. 17 in the first stage. If we keep those 2 separate and we apply what we know, we satisfy our needs, and we don't apply what we master to the things we need, then we end up in that second stage of knowledge. So there's 17 more pieces. And then that comes to the third stage, what we manifest. So there's 17, 17, 17. So out of these 55 pieces, 51 of them have to do with these 2 groups, 12 and 5. In addition to that, we also have 4 more pieces. We have 2 forms of consequences. The first form of consequences is the knowledge of the consequences. A long time ago, life was simple. We knew to keep these 2 groups separate. If we pretend this is a Garden of Eden, we can say these are 2 trees. One is the tree of life, the trees of life, and then we have the tree of knowledge. And the knowledge of the consequences is you got to keep those 2 trees separate. You can't take something that you master and apply it to something you need. It changes the need. It boggles my mind how we refuse to accept that, but I know why. Addictions and denial are huge factors, plus everyone else is doing it, so it doesn't seem like it makes any sense, does it? But this is how simple things are. Life used to be simple. We had to keep these 2 things separate. We had to have the knowledge of the consequences. If we did that, then we would apply what we knew, and we'd make it to the second stage. We would not make bad applications to the things we mastered. We'd satisfy our needs. And then it's an automatic. Once you satisfy your needs, you end up in paradise. You go through the second doorway. So out of the 4 portals that existed initially, 2 of them were doorways. First was the only thing we had to do. It's all we had to do long ago, just go through one doorway. That's all we had to do. Life was simple. The second doorway is an automatic. And then what happens with what we got? What we got influences what we do and what we think. There's a ripple effect where effects become causes, as in the cause loop, and effects become knowledge, as in the knowledge loop. And everyone knows that experience is the best teacher, so when we look at these 55 pieces, 51 have to do with 12 and 5, that's 17 times 3 is 51. Then we have two forms of consequences. I already talked about the knowledge of the consequences. Keep those two trees separate. Don't apply what you mastered to what you need. But then there's the experience of the consequences. The most important piece of the puzzle is the experience of the consequences. And if we have the experience of the consequences, that reinforces, you see, what we're doing. And then that's one extra piece we have now. That's how we get one extra piece, is once we do the right thing, what we manifest, there's that ripple effect where effects become knowledge. Now we got the experience of the consequences. But effects can also come back around with the causal loop and create causes. So we have positive causes in this situation, so we still end up in paradise. So there's we get a positive effect that affects us, and we have we're good and we're healthy, and that just keeps us doing the right thing. Now, how did life get complicated? And how complicated has it gotten? Well, in the beginning, if we don't include accidents and acts of nature, 3 boxes, 4 portals, 55 pieces. If we do include things outside of control like accidents and acts of nature, then we'd have 2 more boxes and 2 more portals. The first portal would be from the second stage to the third stage. We had an accident, act of nature, now we had a negative effect, now I broke a leg. And then, of course, that's going to ripple around with a causal loop. It doesn't go back to the knowledge loop, only comes back to a causal loop, where now that broken leg is going to cause problems. You see, that's a subsequent cause. It's like diabetes. So if we have an accident or act of nature, we end up with something broken. If something's broken, it doesn't work, so now that in itself is a problem. And it creates a problem. So there's the causal loop. That's a subsequent cause, like diabetes. I illustrated that before. So at the most, life was really complicated when we had accidents and acts of nature. Now we got 5 boxes, 6 portals, and 57 pieces. Still, life was simple. Now life is so complicated, we have 6 boxes, 18 portals, and then I've identified 281 of the most important pieces out of the millions of pieces that are within this special teaching tool I created that uses knowledge in a way that's never been seen before. We're not taught the 3 stages of knowledge. We need to understand that every time we talk about anything of any significance, we have to understand, are we talking about the first stage, the second stage, or the third stage? And now life is so complicated, we used to just be playing in paradise, but now we slid down into the dark ages. And now we got one more box that's really screwing with us. It's the negative A box of false knowledge. That's what gets us in trouble, because we cannot learn anything when we think we already know. So the number one problem of knowledge we have now, because life is so complicated, is we don't have the knowledge of how to live. And the number one reason why we can't find it is because we have this false knowledge in its place. So when we look at the first stage of knowledge, that's where our belief system is at. There's a circle in the plus A box of knowledge that represents what we know, that's true. Then we had a circle in the negative A box of false knowledge, which is false. And the worst false belief we have is the false belief that cooking is an art. It's not an art, it's the fall of mankind. It's what made life complicated. So what happened long ago? Remember, we have 2 groups of needs, 2 trees in our garden, 1 law, knowledge of the consequences, don't apply one to the other. Well, we made that mistake. Cooking, that's what it did. Don't you see? That's the fall of mankind. We took something we mastered, fire, applied to one of our needs, food. Now we're not satisfying our needs, so instead of going from the plus A box of knowledge into the right B box, the plus B box of right actions, satisfying our needs, making good applications, we're making bad applications. Now we're making a mistake. That's how it started. And we can only speculate, why did we do that? And it'd be nice to know, but it's not important. We don't need to know it in order to correct the mistakes and get back up there. Once we get up there, then we'll probably figure that out, hopefully, and not repeat that mistake. So life is complicated. Why? Because long ago our ancestors made that mistake. They slid down, they made a mistake, but the problem with satisfying our needs is we can do them wrong. We can do them less than ideal and still derive pleasure out of it. Like you're freezing to death and someone hands you a blanket that's been soaking in fecal matter. Doesn't that fecal soaked blanket feel good when you're freezing to wrap yourself around it? Oh, I like it. But then you end up with smallpox. It isn't contagious. There is a contagion element. There's bacteria that's eating up that crap. It doesn't belong inside of us. So if it gets inside of us, we're going to have problems. So yeah, we're going to see results if we wash our hands before we operate. Oh, that proves the contagion theory. No, it doesn't. There's a contagion element. The microbe is not the problem. It's the terrain. And we shouldn't be exposed to this kind of stuff to begin with. But what happened in the beginning, again, we slid down. This is what our ancestors did. And when they did this, again, we have this reptilian brain that can get addicted to anything that's pleasurable. Now, I know we're not going to get addicted to fecal soaked blankets, but it illustrates the point that, oh boy, it feels good when you're freezing. So when you're hungry, the wrong food will satisfy us, just like as if we're drowning and we're given some smog to breathe. You suck in that smog and go, boy, that's the best tasting air I ever had, and yet it's the worst. So things are relative, right? But in this case, what we have to realize is that because our ancestors did that, they went to denial. They passed it on down to their children. Now we start our journey off in life because of our traditions on the wrong path with this false knowledge. That's why life is so complicated. Because everyone's making the same mistake. We're still repeating the fall of mankind. When we don't have the right knowledge and we apply it, then we make mistakes. So there's two ways to make mistakes. One is when you don't apply what you know, and when you make a bad application, then you come down and you make a mistake. Or you simply apply what you think is so, and it ain't. So that's the big problem we face. Most of us are doing things that we think are okay. They're not okay. They're wrong, my friends. They're the reason why we have so many problems. This is why it's so complicated. Because when you don't know, you have an inaccurate belief system. When you don't know, you have false knowledge in place of the knowledge you need in the first stage of knowledge. When you don't know, you're making mistakes in the second stage of knowledge that are causing most of your problems in the third stage of knowledge. When you don't know that most of our problems that we get in the third stage of knowledge are 100% within our control based on the things we're doing, then what's going to happen? We're going to get tricked and fooled, and we will lack the wisdom to know the difference between a problem that's within our control and outside of control. And this is how it gets even more complicated, because when we look at the negative seed box of problems down here, remember 3 stages of knowledge: acquired, applied, manifested, paradise, the dark ages. Down here, what we got are a lot of problems. Now, if we look at our problems simplistically, there are problems that are 100% within our control based on the things we do, our lifestyle choices. And there are problems that are not 100% within our control based on things done to us, like accidents and acts of nature. And since we're living in the dark ages, we also have acts of war, crime, and violence, where we have limited control. Accidents and acts of nature, we basically have no control whatsoever. But the point here is you want to be able to differentiate between what we have within our control and outside of control, 100% that is. And I label those 103 and 104 in my special teaching tool, where I've identified these 281 pieces. And the problem we have is we can't differentiate between a 103 and a 104. We've been tricked into saying that all these 103s that are within our control are actually 104s, and now we need doctors to come in and give us a drug for that problem. And this is where we're being tricked and fooled. This is how it gets really complicated, because when you look at all those 103s that we've been told are 104s outside our control, there are hundreds of thousands of them. All you have to do is divide the body up into 1,000,000 parts, and once you understand disease is a bodily process, it's not an entity, it's going through stages dealing with things inside of us that don't belong inside of us mostly, as well as things that we need inside of us that aren't there. But when it's due to things that are inside of us that don't belong in there, all you have to do is just divide the body up in 1,000,000 parts and then label or name the symptom based on what stage the body is trying to get rid of it. And there's 4 main stages the body goes through dealing with that. So right now I've come up with 4 million disease names. This is how we're getting tricked. This is how we're getting fooled. They come up with disease names that make it sound like it's really something, like it's an entity, and all they're doing is describing the symptoms based on the location of where the disease is. It's a magic act. It's a sleight of hand, don't you see? Cause and effect. Look over here, don't look at the cause. Well, it isn't your fault, remember? Don't blame the greasy French fries. Blame biology, man. It's a medical condition. You see how we're brainwashed? Doctors are taught that most diseases are due to inappropriate signals. Just blame biology. It's inappropriate signals. So that way they're justified in interfering with the body's communication process. So this is why it's so complicated. Because the fall of mankind destroyed a nutrient that feeds one of our senses. Now we've lost one of our senses. So this is the main reason why life is so complicated. Life got really complicated when we lost one of our senses. We still have it, but it's so small it's virtually non-existent. And this is what gives us the wrong mentality. This is what gives us an exchange mentality, which ultimately evolved to where we have money that can now be used to own and control all these other areas that we're being brainwashed through. And that's what's happening right now. There's a very small group of people, and we know this. It's been traced back to a very small group of people that own and control all of the major sectors of human endeavor. So we're being brainwashed to ensure we keep having false knowledge and we end up on the wrong path, because guess what happens down here? And guess what happens up here in paradise? There are no rulers in paradise. We've got to be sick in order to have sick people control us. And remember, those sick people are just a reflection of us. So the ultimate solution is always to not get distracted, to always get reconnected, not get distracted. See, that's how life gets complicated. Every time we get distracted, it gets complicated. But we're on the wrong path. We don't have the knowledge. We don't know we're making mistakes. And we think most of our problems are outside our control. And we end up going down rabbit holes, looking for a cure for a disease that will never exist. There are no chemical solutions for lifestyle-related problems. They'll never find a cure for cancer. Never. None exist. Now, there are some interesting protocols that can help take away that symptom. You have to remember, disease is the bodily process. Cancer is at the end stage of disease. And just because the cancer goes away doesn't mean you don't have those other stages, or you still don't have the cause that can still cause problems. In other words, we have what's called a latent disease. A latent disease. Disease just does not fall out of the sky. When you have a heart attack or you get cancer at 60, 70, 80 years of age, or 30, 40, 50, whatever it is nowadays, whatever happens to you, it didn't just come out of the sky and attack you. You earned that disease every day of your life. And how fast it happens, you can thank your parents. You can thank your mom. What did you eat, Mom, when I was inside you? Did you breastfeed me? What were you eating then? What kind of crap were you feeding then? Dr. Price, Western Price, proved that as soon as you start eating processed foods, it creates prenatal nutritional injury. Brain doesn't even develop properly. No wonder we have all these behavioral problems. No wonder life is complicated. It's the condition of us. See, this is what's so important about understanding the fall of mankind and how it destroyed one of our senses, and how it changed the bowel transit time of our food. So now we have a serpent within us, and that serpent that's within us, we got this slow, stagnant cesspool, that waste matter, that filth, especially if it's animal products, seeps back into our body. That doesn't belong in there. And then we're missing the coherent sunlight energy that we're supposed to store in the nucleus of our cells. And those are two huge contributing factors to the dark side of our behavior. And this is why life is so complicated, because the darkest of the dark side of our behavior, or the sickest of us, are exploiting the sickness in man. They're taking advantage of us being sick and out of control. We're easily controlled. And this is why life is so complicated. If it wasn't for this aspect of our behavior, we could have figured this out a long time ago. It's not that complicated. But everything in our society conspires against us. Everything. Our traditions start us off on the wrong path. The darkest of the dark side of our behavior controls the books that we read in school. What are we taught in health classes? What are we teaching our nutritionists? What are we teaching our doctors? It's a bunch of crap is what it is. It's been controlled. It's been controlled for thousands of years. According to Eustace Mullins, for the last 3,000 years, this small group of people who worship Satan, Lucifer, have usurped the priesthood and the educational system back 3,000 years ago. So a lot of our great books have been manipulated. Remember, the Talmud was written under duress. I think it was by 21 or 23 rabbis. While they were enslaved, they had to write a new book to replace the Torah, but it had to meet the powers that be guidelines. So the real message has been diluted. These people have infiltrated all of our great books. That's why we can't trust anything 100% anymore. And I know some people can't handle gray areas. It's got to be black or white, and I what can I say? Good luck. Question everything. And once you bump up your biophotons, my friend, you won't need certain things like you used to before. Those belief systems won't mean as much, and you'll understand gray area better, and then you can wrap your brain around it. And I understand that's one of the biggest problems that we face right now. Getting out of the hell we're in. None of us are in a position to evaluate what we're doing and what we need to do, because we don't know what we're missing. And that's the whole thing. We don't know what we're missing. This is one of the most exciting things I've ever done in my life. And it is for almost everybody I coach. Some people struggle because of the damage they've done to themselves. And people ask me, well, how do I know if I'm damaged? Well, if you're not seeing results, then you're probably damaged. Even if you are seeing results, you may also still be damaged, and you may still have problems down the road. So how do I don't know. I don't diagnose anybody. That's not my calling. It's not my job. I don't diagnose. I don't prescribe. I don't play doctor. I don't treat symptoms. I'm not Piece 106. I'm up here with the cause of our problems, with the knowledge of habits. I'm all about pieces 22 to 33. And pieces 34 and 35, especially 35, how do we deal with the art when we have problems that are outside of, when we have subsequent causes that don't go away because we remove primary causes? There's a lot that falls under that category. And no one can be a master to that piece of the puzzle. And I try my hardest to study as much as I can, and it's a never-ending process because I'm always having someone ask me, do I know about this and this and this? And 80, 90% of the time, yeah, I already have a file on it. But guess what? I always don't have a file because they keep coming up with stuff every time you turn around. And it's almost a waste of time. I can understand why some people don't want to be bothered with looking into herbs because they already found what they think is the piece of the puzzle. How much time should we spend on the art? Well, I like to dabble in it. That's kind of like a hobby for me. Actually, it's my profession. But again, I don't claim to be an expert in that. Although when I first got into this a long time ago, one of the first things I did, I created a file on alternative cancer therapy. So there's a whole bunch of the art I was confronted with. No, that's not the right word. That I was able to find right off the bat, and then I just added. There's so much to that. But the point here that we really need to understand is that when we remove the primary causes, most of our problems go away. And that's where we always start. So we'll always start with the science. We'll always remove the primary causes. We'll always satisfy those 12 essential needs that we did when we lived in paradise, when life was simple. But remember, now that we're not up in paradise anymore, we've got this other group of needs. So now life is complicated. Instead of 3 boxes, maybe 5, 4 portals, maybe 6, 55 pieces, maybe 57, we have 6 boxes, 18 portals, 281 pieces, 2 groups of needs now instead of 1. Life is more complicated. That second group of needs can get really complicated. But it's not as complicated if we get distracted and we look for chemical solutions for lifestyle-related problems. That's the biggest way we're being distracted. So I say it over and over. Either we're getting reconnected or we're getting distracted. And if we focus on a problem that's within our control, it's a major distraction. If you have cancer and you're doing chemotherapy and radiation, you're being tricked and you're being fooled, because that's not a solution for those problems. Never is. Never, ever. Surgery, there is a time and a place if something's blocking something, like a tumor in a bile duct, for example. Classic example, when we got to do something. Otherwise, correct the mistakes, satisfy those 12 essential needs initially. Be aware you have to support your body if it's damaged. And good luck figuring that out for some of y'all, because it might be a genetic defect where you don't produce a certain gene that produces beta-glucan, for example. Now, that can be really complicated. The rest of it is simple. Yeah, I'm damaged. I'm having trouble with my blood sugar. So, okay, you keep taking your medication until you clean your cells out so the cells can say, come on in, sugar, we got room for you now. But see, it can be simple, it can be complicated. It's best to always just remove the primary causes and see what happens. And then if you already know you got problems, then you can address those if it's specific, like diabetes, for example. But a lot of the problems that we have, if it's high cholesterol, high blood pressure, we can get off those medications very, very quickly as soon as your body gets back into balance. And we need to get off those poisons, because all drugs are poisons. And the only things I don't consider poisons would be, I don't even consider them drugs, and that would be something like insulin or thyroxine. See, doctors are tricky. They add a few things into their protocol to make it look, we got life-saving drugs. Don't call insulin, thyroxine life-saving drugs. Now, yeah, you've got medication that can stop a racing heart, and if you're operating on someone and they're freaking out and their heart's racing, you can save their life then. But you put their life in jeopardy to begin with. So we have to realize that if we want to make things simple, we don't want to get lost down a rabbit hole. We don't want to look at all those pieces that are within our control. We don't want to look at all the symptoms. We don't want to focus on that. We want to focus on those 12 essential needs and those 2 additional temporary needs. We want to correct the fall of mankind, number 1. Remember, there's 5 main mistakes that are causing most of our problems. They all have to do with 5 things that we mastered. And then we apply them to our needs. Got to keep those trees separate if we want to stay in paradise and not have problems within our control. We get problems within our control when we make a deliberate bad application and take something we mastered, fire, machines, apply it to food, chemicals, processed foods. Keep it in mind, not everything we process is going to be bad. We can make good applications, especially when we need to modify what used to be the best preparation for a better way of life, a water fast. And that's where the juice fast comes into play. That's where a solid food vacation comes into play. And that's down below in the description box. So if you want to make life simple, get reconnected. Watch the Deborah Duncan Show. Listen to Dr. Roba on day 21 of his juice fast when I was coaching him. He was interviewed by these two women. Great interview. So positive, so excited. Read the comments down below. A lot of people are doing this. Most are seeing great results. Now, some of you, it's important if you have pre-existing conditions where your intestines were irritated, Crohn's, colitis, and things like that. If you have diarrhea the whole time, realize that a lot of people do, but you may be plagued with that problem because your intestines are tender or insensitive. You might not be able to do this. You might try adding some psyllium just to see if that bulks things up. That's usually what I suggest for people who have a lot of diarrhea and they can't have it because it's inconvenient. And that will solve that problem pretty easily. So we have to be aware that if anything doesn't work, we don't do it. So certain conditions might be irritated because remember, when we do a juice fast, even a water fast, these organs of elimination, they increase their activity. And this may irritate them more. And also we have to keep in mind the retracing phenomenon. Someone commented the other day, feeling good except my tonsils were swollen. Well, this can be a form of retracing. But remember, our tonsils are simply part of our lymph system. When they swell, that means they're trying to do their job better. And what do these bastards do? They cut them out for doing their job. Instead of rewarding those tonsils, saying, good job, way to swell up so you're doing a better job, they cut them out. They cut out all the organs of that have to do with our digestive system, not thinking they serve a purpose. The gallbladder, another good example. Hell, we'll take out your colon, don't worry about it. We'll remove anything if it's bothering you, because we don't know how to fix it. Well, there is a simple solution. But if you go the medical route, it's going to get complicated. Don't get corralled or herded into the medical corral. I keep feeling something on my head. And get distracted. That's how it gets complicated. Make things simple. Take charge of your life. Change what you do. I guarantee you, my friends, when you satisfy all your needs, most, if not all, your problems are going to go away. There is a point of irreversibility, which means you don't want to waste any time, do you? Go down below, watch my seminar after you've watched Deborah Duncan and listened to Dr. Roba, and jump on board, be part of the solution. Be the best that you can be, and when you do, I guarantee you, you're in for a treat.